Well, let's go ahead and get started. I want to thank you all so much for being here. Our staff was just reflecting. We started with this governance committee meeting a week ago. We've had 3 additional workshops since then, one on community engagement, one on capacity building, one on data and research. Many of you have joined us for multiple of those committees. We couldn't be more appreciative and value the input that we're getting more. So we're really excited about this project, and it's been great seeing such a diverse set of our 8-county regional community coming together to have these discussions and lend your guidance. So thank you for that. So this is our second governance committee meeting for the CERF project. And to maybe a couple of housekeeping things and then preview our agenda. The first housekeeping thing is we have this on calendar for 2 hours. We're really hoping to finish it in 1. We have a draft governance model that we want to share with you and get your input on. So that's really the only thing we have on agenda for today. And I hope we're able to move through it. Let's see. Isa, what else do we need to know for housekeeping here? We're going to do introductions in just a minute. Anything else that people need to know before we get into the bulk of the meeting?
No, I don't think so. We can pull up maybe the agenda slide and just give folks a preview of what the flow will look like. But I think you've covered it. We're going to, I feel like most of the folks on this call were also on the first one, so we won't need to do much of a recap of the last meeting, but we'll do a quick version of that. Do an overview of our proposed governance structure, and then we have a kind of modified consensus discussion activity at the end to kind of wrap up.
Great. And let's pull off, thank you for that. And let's pull off our screen share for just a minute. And what I thought we'd do is, because this is our second meeting, I'd like to ask for introductions around the room from anyone who wasn't at the first meeting. So if you were at the first meeting, then maybe you could say hello in the chat and remind us of your organizational facilitation. But if you were not in the first governance meeting, then I'm going to ask that you come off mute and introduce yourself, including your name, your organizational affiliation, and where you are in the region. So let's see. And I don't know that I'm going to be able to off the top of my head know who that is. So I'm going to ask you to just volunteer. And I see Jim has got his hand up.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Jim Alves with SMUD. I participated in some of the other subcommittees, but missed this one as I was out last week. So appreciated the detailed notes in the recording. I made it through most of it, but we'll appreciate the brief recap of the last meeting, and happy to be here again with SMUD Economic Development Program. We are the publicly owned non-for-profit electric provider for Sacramento County.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Thanks for being here. And Kiara.
Hi, everyone. Kiara Reed, Executive Director of Civic Thread, formerly Walk Sacramento. We're a nonprofit planning and advocacy organization focused on health equity in the built environment. I am sorry to have missed the first one. Was out at a wedding, and I'm also going to apologize for being off camera. I fell in my garden and have a boo-boo on my head, which means I can't do my hair. So I'm sparing y'all the image of me today.
Oh, well, Kiara, I'm really sorry to hear that. I hope that you're recovering. Nobody likes falling down, and I've found that I don't know, as an adult, it's even worse than when I have kids too. They'll fall down all the time and just bounce right back. But I feel like if I fall down, it's a pretty major event. So
it's weirdly disorienting. Yeah,
exactly. All right, and Vanity.
Good afternoon to everyone. Vanity Campbell. I'm from the University of California Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources, and my role is a proposal development coordinator within the Office of Contracts and Grants. And I did have the opportunity to attend the first kickoff meeting, but have not had the opportunity to attend any of the previous subcommittees. So getting started with jumping in here today and looking forward to engaging with everybody going forward.
Great, thanks for being here. Anybody else?
Brenda Ruiz with the Sacramento Food Policy Council. Also did not attend the first one. I'm really excited about this committee, and hopefully we can add value with the things that we've learned. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Brenda. And anyone else who's coming to the governance meeting for the first time? Okay, and I did see in the chat, somebody mentioned, Chini mentioned, I will not be able to attend the next meeting. And I want to give you all an update on that. We have found within our timeline, we really need to make our governance decision today. So we have left that on the calendar as a hold in case there's anything that we need to do, but we are not anticipating having a third committee meeting. So thanks for bringing that up, Chini, and reminding us to give an update on that. So we'll go ahead and take that off calendar, or we'll adapt it to something else, by the end of this week, and then you'll know if you have that time free. So thanks for the thanks for the reminder on that. Okay, well, oh, Colleen, I saw you come off mute and go back on mute. Did you want to introduce yourself?
Hi. Yeah, sure. Sorry I'm late. I was just jumping from another meeting. Hi, I'm Colleen Moorhead. I am founder CEO of Clear Strategies and Cyber Proud. Thanks.
All right. Okay, we're going to jump into our agenda. And the first thing we're going to do is just briefly, because there are some people who did not attend the first governance committee meeting, we're going to do just a brief recap so you know where we've been and kind of what we're reacting to. And then we're going to just go through the document where we have the draft governance proposal and take comments, and then have a discussion and I think we called it a modified consensus discussion. Is that right, Isa? Yeah. Okay. So that's what we're going to do, and I'll turn it over to Isa to do our recap.
Thank you, Evan, and hi, everybody. Thank you for making the time, and really good to be here with you all today. So we're going to start off with just a quick recap of what took place at our first meeting last Thursday. We can go ahead and move to the next slide. So our first meeting was really around kind of setting values that we want to kind of keep core to the CERF process, as well as doing kind of an overview of different existing governance models to get the conversation started, and having kind of a interactive discussion around what are some of the features of a governance structure that we want to make sure we have here in our CERF Sacramento region. So what you're seeing in front of you are just some kind of snapshots of the slides we shared last week. Won't go into too much detail, but as I said, we started off kind of showing you these 5 values that we put together based on interactive sessions that open to all sessions, lunch and learn sessions that we had done in May and June around the CERF. We took your feedback from the last session, and you'll see when we go into an overview of the proposed governance structure that we incorporated that feedback and made some edits to this list of values. So we'll go over that a little bit later. We also reviewed some of the governance approaches that some of the other CERF regions are taking. So we looked at Eastern Sierra, Orange County, Southern Border, and Los Angeles. These are all different CERF regions throughout California. We took a glimpse of some of the things that they were thinking about as they set up their governance structure. We also took a look at some governance structures in other regional economic development processes like Fresno Drive and Envision Tahoe. And then we also showed a couple of examples of different kinds of methods for discussion and building consensus. And we also took your feedback on those as well. Next slide, please.
And Isa, I'll mention with Kiara here that the decision-making models that we talked about, I think came from the Regional Climate Collaborative. Yes. So that was really helpful.
That's right. Thanks, Evan, for calling that out. And then the next slide here, we also did, so as I said, we also did some kind of interactive Jamboarding around, what are the features of a governance structure that we want to make sure we're incorporating into our region. So again, you're kind of just seeing snapshots here to illustrate. The follow-up email that Alana sent out last week has all of this kind of in full for folks to take a look at if they'd like to kind of go into more detail and see, specifically what folks all had commented. All right, so that is it for our quick recap. I'm now going to move over to discussing the proposed governance structure we put together. As I said, we kind of took the input from that first meeting, as well as input from some of the other subcommittee meetings we've had this week. There's a lot of kind of overlap and intersection between all those buckets of activity. And I am going to pull up my screen share here. All right, can I get a thumbs up if folks are seeing this clearly? Okay, great, thank you. So this is hot off the presses, the proposed governance structure that we have put together using primarily, as I said, kind of input we've gotten from this subcommittee, as well as some input from the other subcommittee meetings we've done, and input from, we've hosted kind of, as I said, open to all lunch and learns, as well as a couple of regional focused roundtables in Yuba and Sutter County and counties and Colusa County. And we've taken that all and turned it into this document that I'm about to go through with you. Really what I'm going to be doing is just kind of slowly scrolling through this and kind of talking through the different components. So whatever way you absorb information the best, or whatever works well with you, feel free to do that. You can kind of read along as I'm scrolling through, or just kind of listen to me talk through the different components, whatever makes the most sense for you, please do that. And with that, I will go ahead and get started. So this is our Sacramento region proposed governance structure. We wanted to start it off with kind of calling out the values that this governance structure is rooted in. These include both kind of process focused as well as outcome focused core values. As I said, it started from that list of 5 we showed at the first meeting, and then we evolved it a little bit based on the feedback we got from folks. So I'll go through these now. So first is the value of equity. We center marginalized voices in both processes and outcomes. The second is inclusivity. We create an inclusive table so that no community is left behind. The third is transparency. We openly share information and ideas to build a community of trust and shared understanding. The fourth is respect. We respect and acknowledge each other as well as previous and ongoing work. The next is action. We commit to creating action-oriented goals and timelines and following through with these. The next is data-driven, or the value of being data-driven. We prioritize the use of data to drive decision-making and include the lived experience as an important data contribution. And finally, the value of sustainability. So environmental sustainability is a critical component of our vision for economic growth that we are all trying to put together here. So that is kind of our set of values that really root this governance structure, and we always want to start off with that. And then I'm going to move on to talking about the actual structure of our proposed governance structure. So the basic structure of this, this governance structure essentially includes 3 things. So our governance structure is going to be made up of, number 1, the collaborative members, number 2, either activity-based or strategy-based committees, and third, a leadership council. And I'll explain kind of what all these, the sort of function and membership of all of these. And at the very end, you're going to see kind of we have a graph here to kind of illustrate that in a more visual way. So starting with our collaborative members. So again, to recap, the formation of this collaborative is one of the primary outcomes of the planning phase of the CERF. Our region's collaborative members will include representation from the different subregions, priority disinvested groups, and there is no limit to the number of members in this collaborative. We also want to note that it will include balanced representation from all the different kind of relevant stakeholders to the CERF process. The full list is here. It includes, for example, labor, employers, community-based organizations, government agencies, economic development agencies, and several others. The collaborative will also include representation from aligned regional initiatives, because again, kind of recalling what the CERF guidelines say, one of the primary objectives of the CERF is to make sure that we're kind of aligning with other sources of federal and state funding and federal and state initiatives. So we want to make sure we have representation from these initiatives, such as, for example, the K through 16 Educational Collaborative and the Regional Climate Collaborative to make sure that these are all in alignment with one another. So what does it mean to be a member of the collaborative? So members of the collaborative commit to participating in input sessions, either by attending the sessions, reviewing related materials, completing surveys, or otherwise providing input. We also call out here that, again, pursuant to those process-focused core values of equity, inclusivity, and transparency, the regional convener is going to ensure that there are multiple paths and methods to participation that take into account the time constraints and other limitations that folks might have. and really just trying to meet collaborative members where they are in terms of ways that work for them to engage and to participate. We also note that members may, but are certainly not obligated to take on additional roles and responsibilities, such as, for instance, participating in a committee or seeking to be elected to the Leadership Council, which I'll discuss in further detail below. And then a final note for the collaborative members, there will be opportunities for stipends for participation, as well as funded partnerships, the details of which are going to be fleshed out in the planning phase. All right, the next component of our governance structure is going to be our committees. And our committees, when we think about our committees for our governance structure, we're thinking about them in kind of two phases, a phase one and a phase two. So sort of overall, these committees are made up of persons from the collaborative and are delegated by the collaborative to formulate and advance action in key activities or strategies. So as I said, we're thinking about these committees in two phases. In phase one, which would approximately be the first 2 quarters of the planning phase, committees are going to be organized according to the 3 key planning phase activities. So it's kind of similar to what's happening now, the way we've broken out the subcommittees. So data research and evaluation, capacity building and technical assistance, and community engagement. So those phase one committees are tasked with setting goals and developing a framework and a course of action and advancing that action in their respective activities, together with input from the overall collaborative and with kind of the ultimate end in view of enabling the collaborative and the leadership council to preliminarily identify, what are the sector-based and what are the strategy-based priorities that we want to kind of explore and advance in the planning phase. And then we also note that there's sort of space for kind of ad hoc focus groups or working groups to be formed as needed, as might come up in the course of the planning phase. In terms of representation, the phase one committees are going to include representation again from the different subregions, which are listed in parentheses here, priority disinvested communities as defined in the CERF regions, CERF guidelines and identified by the collaborative. And the committees also have to reflect sort of the composition of the collaborative in terms of consisting of a diverse mix of different regional entities, organizations, and communities. And then each committee is going to democratically elect by majority vote among its members, 1 to 2 co-leads who will then represent the committee in the Leadership Council, which we'll talk a little bit more about further below. The committee will use a discussion and consensus model for decision-making. And similar to collaborative membership, there will be an opportunity for stipends for participation as well as funded partnerships. And then moving into phase two, so our committees in phase two, again, similarly made up of persons from the collaborative. However, in phase two, which is going to approximately be the 3rd quarter and onwards of the planning phase, these committees are going to be organized around sector-based or strategy-based priorities that have been preliminarily identified by the collaborative. So again, just some examples to illustrate a sector-based strategy such as advanced mobility, or maybe it's more a strategy-based priority such as getting projects shovel-ready or strategies to close the digital divide. And these phase two committees are tasked with kind of further exploring and fleshing out these respective strategies. So then what happens to those phase one committees? So the phase one kind of activity-based committees are then dispersed and incorporated into the different phase two committees. So that what happens is that every strategy or sector-based committee has a data research component, a capacity building component, and a community engagement component built into it so that it can move forward. Similar to phase one committees, phase two committees include representation from priority disinvested communities. And similarly, but slightly different from the phase one committees, representation from each of the subregions in these phase two committees will depend on kind of the relevance of that particular strategy to the subregion. So if you have a subregion that has sort of a unique set of sector and strategy priorities that don't necessarily have a ton of practical overlap with some of the other strategies and sector priorities, then the collaborative can opt to kind of create a subregion as its own standalone committee. And similar to phase one, each committee is going to democratically elect by majority vote 1 to 2 co-leads who will then represent the committee in the Leadership Council. Again, similar discussion and consensus model for decision-making, and again, opportunities for stipends and for participation, as well as funded partnerships. Recognize that there's a lot of kind of new information coming out here, but I'm going to go ahead and kind of go through this full thing so we have a full picture, and then we'll certainly have space for questions and discussion after. So finally, the last component that we're going to talk about is the Leadership Council, which is going to be the formally constituted deliberative and decision-making body of the governance structure. The Leadership Council will have up to 36 members and include representatives from each of the subregions, priority disinvested communities, and the phase 1 or phase 2 committee co-leads. So again, we have that transition from phase 1 committees to phase 2 committees. The idea is that after that transition, your phase 1 committee co-leads will cycle off the Leadership Council and then be replaced by the phase 2 committee co-leads. And then we have here kind of bulleted sort of an approximate distribution of what that membership would look like, kind of evenly distributing between different subregions, priority disinvested communities, and phase 1, phase 2 committee leads. Again, just kind of an approximation. The actual details of what this will look like will become a little more clear as we move into the planning phase. So the Leadership Council is tasked with overseeing the work of the phase 1 and phase 2 committees and helping to preliminarily identify those sector and strategy-based priorities for phase 2, guided of course by the input from the collaborative members and with the end in view of adhering to and advancing the mission and purpose of the CERF program. This Leadership Council will meet the last week of every month using a sort of by default, a virtual format. We also put in here the possibility of one meeting every quarter will be an in-person meeting with the venue kind of rotating among the different subregions. The Leadership Council will make use of a discussion and modified consensus model, which essentially involves, you'll sort of see this in action a little bit later, but not necessarily sort of a very formal structured vote, but kind of this idea of expressing that you either support, can live with, abstain, or oppose a particular proposal or statement. And again, similar to the previous committees, there will be previous structures. There are going to be opportunities for stipends for participation as well as funded partnerships. And then the final thing here is really just kind of a visual illustration of everything I've talked about thus far, just because I think sometimes that's helpful to kind of get arms around what we're actually talking about here. So you're seeing here in phase 1, you have the Leadership Council up top, and feeding into the Leadership Council are the committee co-leads here in the center, representatives from priority disinvested communities, and representatives from the different subregions. You're also kind of seeing these jagged lines between the 3 middle rectangles, which kind of just emphasize or communicate that the committees as well include representation from those subregions and those disinvested communities. And then at the bottom rectangle, just kind of calling out that collaborative group and the different sectors or communities that are going to be represented in that collaborative membership. And then it's a very similar chart for phase 2, but just kind of noting that the committees have kind of shifted from being activity-based to being more sector-based or strategy-based. And with that, I'm going to take it off screen share and pause. Like I said, I know that was a ton of information for folks, so we're going to create some space for questions, reactions, or just maybe some silence as people kind of digest and look at this. Oh, I see a hand up. Go ahead, Kara.
Thanks. First of all, just want to say incredible work that the Valley Vision team has done in putting this together. I'm just really impressed with the level of detail that y'all have provided even just after one meeting. So hats off to y'all. Thank you for taking the lead on this. My comment that I'd like to make is in regards to the Leadership Council or the leadership. Yeah. I would heavily advocate for more weight given to the priority community or priority folks from disadvantaged communities having more seats on that Leadership Council. What I see when I look at that is equal distribution amongst those groups. And I'd like to see an equitable distribution, which would give more weight to folks who are coming from those disinvested communities. And it could look like reducing some of those 12 representatives from different subregions down to 10, and maybe the 12 representatives down to 10 from the other category, and bolstering up that that middle category there for the folks that are from the disinvested communities. I'll leave that there for the group to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. Really appreciate that. Leo, go ahead. And yes, I see folks are kind of plugging into the chat as well. Please also do that.
Hey, just wanted to also say really good job putting this together. Really impressive work for just a couple of days, so we appreciate it. But one quick question. So for the committees, is there, you may have mentioned this, but is there a goal set in mind? Are they producing a report or a paper at the end of that? And you can maybe answer it after we sort of go through everything else.
I can give kind of a preliminary answer to that. So I think that would be, the specifics of that would be kind of for the committee to determine. We kind of have, just generally speaking, like what their charge is in terms of moving forward or exploring that particular activity or that particular strategy or sector priority. But in terms of kind of the nuts and bolts of what that will look like in terms of a product created or how frequently they're meeting or how they're communicating that to the leadership council, I think that'll kind of sort of be shaped by the committee itself, and that'll become a little bit more clear as we move a little further along the process. Thanks, Leo. I'm seeing lots of hands. I'm not totally sure the order they were put up, so I'm just going to call them left to right on my screen. Go ahead, Heidi.
Thanks, Isa, and echo everybody's comments. This is, to get this onto 4 pages is pretty impressive. So, and one of those pages being a graphic representation of it. So I would echo what Kiara said, and being from a small region, we're going to have a lot of overlap of people. So I think, technically we'd be on the sub-regional position for the leadership council, but then also in the phase 1 committee region. And I don't necessarily know if some of these smaller regions in Sacramento will have a separate person for each of those. So I think reducing that number, sub-regionally and committee wise to ensure that more robust participation from underrepresented is something I can wholeheartedly get behind. Because again, I can represent us on the leadership committee, and it doesn't necessarily need to be both co-chairs from the other committees. But, it may be, I just think there's ways that we can work through that. So appreciate that thought and echo reducing that number.
Awesome. Thank you, Heidi. Appreciate that feedback. Go ahead, Anthony.
I was trying to get off mute there. I think my comment was about the number as well. I wonder if there's some flexibility with them with the number of who can participate in the leadership committee, if representation can increase diversity and inclusion of that group. If somebody is coming that represents something that's not already represented there, I think there could be and should be made some space for that person to participate.
Right, of course. Thank you for that. Karen?
So in terms of the phase 2, with like different priorities might be more relevant to certain subregions or not, I just want to advocate for some flexibility in that, because YOLO is part of the Sacramento region, but then in certain categories, like sometimes we're actually in consortia with Yuba Sutter or Calusa, and some of the needs and resources and opportunities fit best with that Sacramento region, and sometimes fit more with our neighbors to the north with, Yuba Sutter, Calusa. So I would say in that phase 2, I would just advocate for some flexibility in that subregion inclusion or exclusion, depending on because there's other counties also probably like YOLO, right? Like El Dorado and whatever. So just some flexibility there for certain parts of one region that's like a bigger region like the SAC one to kind of jump in with others. And I'm going to stop because I think there's a party behind me.
That makes sense, Karen. It's good feedback.
Thank you, Karen. Jim?
I had a few questions. One is, I think a simple one, but I just wanted to be reminded the timeline. And just as we were talking about the time commitment to participate in these different levels, what's the timeline for the full planning from start to finish?
So the period of performance for the planning phase is 18 to 24 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then where would you, so Valley Vision, if the proposal is accepted, facilitating this, would your organization have a vote, or do you see yourself as purely just facilitating the Leadership Council, for example?
It's a good question, Jim.
It's just something maybe worth considering, or just something to address if there is a dedicated position for that purpose.
Yeah. My off-the-cuff answer, having not quite thought that through yet, would be that we would have a vote or something related to. So we have to be able to carry out our responsibilities as the regional convener, and so in that sense, we need to make sure that we are protected in some decision making to contribute our perspectives and have that count as a vote. So I feel like we would be a voting member, but I think we would also be, really trying to hold true to a space to bring about a collaboration and ideas and not, not overpower the will of the group.
Sure. I just see that, there could be a benefit to the extent that there's like an equal split on a topic, and, it's currently established to be like an even number. So maybe that one vote for Valley Vision is kind of like the odd number that could help make bring resolution to maybe a issue that's divided as to approach. And then I think it's great, and ideally you'd have representation in all the, the collaborative members, the rectangle at the bottom with, workforce. I'm just thinking it could be a challenge, or just will need to be a recruitment effort in terms of getting representation from each of the subregions in each of those categories and in underserved communities. I could see that could be something that will just take some deliberate effort and a recruitment. So
yeah, agreed.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Jim. Any other questions or comments from folks? Gil, I see a hand up. Go ahead, Gil.
This is Gil Matthew from the Nevada County Economic Resource Council. My question is, and I hope I didn't miss it, but is there going to be a review process about the governance at some point? Things generally, what you establish in the beginning, have a way of changing as time goes on, as dynamics change. Will there be a review process to review the structure? We were talking a lot about that governance, that leadership committee, and you have the 12-12-12. There's been conversations about changing those numbers. Is there a automatic reset moment in the governance? Take a look at those issues and change policy?
That's a great question. I think we should write something in to ensure that there's a review process done and the ability to reset as we start to get into the work.
Thank you, Gil.
I see in chat Heidi's comment, monthly meetings are too much, would suggest changing the language to meet bi-monthly, to monthly, depending on the stage of the agenda, needs, and strategy. plus the committees will likely be meeting monthly. So some of the same people might and then have multiple meetings per month. So I appreciate that comment, Heidi. Wonder if I think that makes sense to me as well. Wonder if anybody else has any thoughts on that. I see a thumbs up.
Yeah, I'll just add it's ambitious to say meet monthly, but I think in reality, knowing this is 18 to 24 months, we don't need meetings that we don't need. And just putting in that flexible language in the governance structure ahead of time gives you more flexibility. If we need the monthly meetings, absolutely, or for a certain segment of time, for a certain phase or a certain, component, but just some flexibility built in.
Yeah. And I'm also thinking about the timeline for phase 1 and phase 2. Again, for flexibility's sake, we might want to make that longer than 2 quarters for phase 1. There could be research and other things that need to get carried out during that time that that ideally we'd love to do in 2 quarters, and maybe we would need 3. So, I think we could. I'm a lot of comments I'm hearing are about creating flexibility in our plan, and I support that too. So that might be a good thing as well. Yeah, I see minimum every 2 months. Brenda, go ahead.
Yeah, dovetailing off some of the previous comments, I see a scenario in which the HRC, the High Road Collaborative, which will be all of these things that we're talking about, enters into an MOU with Valley Vision, or some kind of structure that way. That way, Valley Vision can meet all its obligations and meet the requirements of the CERF program and certain services that Valley Vision does with and on behalf of the project for the collaborative then can be more fully defined and tailored specifically to the working group, to the 3 kind of buckets of where people will be in communities of practice. So yeah, TBD, but when we were discussing, the votes and Valley Vision's place in that and the big heavy lifting that you're doing, really it's a future where you guys are providing, Valley Vision is providing, the facilitation and if you do the fiscal sponsorship, the ability to pay for things. So those are just some thoughts, to put a pin in for later. But I could see, almost like a 2 bodies, and Valley Vision is in service of the HRC.
Thanks for that, Brenda. And I'm seeing Carrie McDonald, who's been really diving deep into a lot of our contracting and the policies around CERF, nodding your head. You have any thoughts on that as you're listening to Brenda?
Yeah, Brenda, actually was thinking the same thing, and even actually have already started developing some templates for that. So envisioning, yes, Valley Vision in service to the collaborative, as well as any individual arrangements we might have with people participating on subcommittees, and even those who would like to get a compensation for attending meetings. There needs to be some kind of agreement there as well. So anticipating all of those things. Thanks for bringing that up.
All right, any further questions, comments at this moment? Then I'm going to go through my summary of what I've heard so far, and where that might show up in the proposal itself.
I did have a question, and maybe it has been addressed, about venues or forums for the meetings to occur. Was it envisioned that it would be, most of them would occur virtually to necessitate, the access to the broad number of counties and regions, or would there be individual meetings in each sub-region? Or I don't know if there's been thought to that.
in the proposal itself, we said monthly meetings with a quarterly in person. Maybe if we were going to amend to a minimum of every 2 months meetings, I would maybe say shoot for twice a year in person at locating venues around the region, or maybe even, yeah, once or twice a year in person. I know it's hard to get everyone together, but I do think having in-person touch points could help build our collaborative and build those relationships. Okay. Well, I can talk a little bit about what I heard, and then we can kind of reconcile that with what we shared. So a few comments about the categories of communities that are represented on the Leadership Council, looking for an equitable distribution as opposed to an equal distribution, which is where it is now. I thought Heidi offered a good, flexible, possible solution for that, which would mean, which is in the comments, but I wrote it down as well. So 8 to 10 representatives per subregion, 8 to 12 per committees, and 12 to 15 for our disinvested communities. So that's what I took from that, and I think that makes a lot of sense too, and allows for some flexibility for representation and also a more equitable distribution across our region. So I'll pause there, see if anybody has any comments or thoughts on that. Okay. That also serves a comment from Heidi about rural communities and kind of the burden on what is likely to be a few people that are representing a region, so not to overtax across multiple committees. I heard a number of comments about flexibility. So that range, for example, in this Leadership Council provides a little bit more flexibility to adapt to things that are needed. Flexibility in the way we're thinking about subregions, especially as we get to phase 2, thinking about getting into strategy or even, kind of sub-regionally focused priority groups. So with the example of Yolo County, who is sometimes aligned with Sacramento and sometimes with our more rural counties. So really making sure that we're flexible in how we're thinking about some of those subcommittee or sub-regional definitions. That makes a lot of sense to me. Making sure we design in a review process for the governance structure so that we were, again, kind of remain adaptive and are adapting to whatever we need to think carefully about the Valley Vision relationship in terms of our ability to vote on the committee, as well as kind of that contractual agreement of how Valley Vision relates to the collaborative. And it sounds like we have some thoughts on that already. So that is my summary of where we're going to have some amendments on the proposal and some additional thoughts about what it's looking like. I'll open the floor again and see if anybody has any more comments or thoughts.
I will echo what everybody else is saying in terms of putting together a framework in the quick amount of time, but I will acknowledge that for me, I feel like I need to process it a little bit fast, or a little bit with more time. It'd been great to have this ahead of time where I could review it and give my mind some time to make more meaningful contributions to it. I know that the timeline doesn't necessarily always create space for that. And at the same time, I just want to acknowledge that it does feel like I'm participating in a process that's kind of already predetermined a little bit, where I'm able to kind of add a little bit to it, but not, provide feedback that's maybe could be different if I had more time with it. The other thing that I wanted to mention is can we see the values one more time again? Because I just want to look at them as I'm looking at the framework, just to ensure to me if they look like they're reflecting each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hear you, Anthony, and I'll have more of, well, let's discuss that a little bit more, but let's look at the document again right now. I will note, these are the values we've shared in each of the subcommittees in the last week, and then a couple additions that we've made as a result of the feedback that has come in through those subcommittees. And I wonder if it's possible, Isa, if I want to make sure people can see this even when we take it off screen share. Do we want to send out a link that people can look at now, or is that possible?
Yeah, I can actually send out a file, I think might be easiest. So let me try to do
maybe?
that in the chat, and folks can let me know if that opens for them. Give me 1 second.
I think the only thing that I see that could be amended or adjusted in some way is that sitting on 2 different committees, this one and the engagement committee, culture came up a lot, and I don't see it reflected in any of the values. I see inclusion as something like maybe an aspect of it, or maybe a character trait of it, but I think having some language there that emphasizes the value of culture, the way that we are going to engage these communities in their own languages, how we are going to ensure that facilitation is done that meets people's cultural needs. Those types of things I don't see showing up, and I would like to give more weight to that.
Okay. Brenda.
Couple things on the values. I want to acknowledge and call out that sustainability and environmental sustainability it's not the same thing as environmental justice. So we can have impacted communities have been the victims of greenwashing in some projects. So I just want to acknowledge that there's 2 different things, and using the Calavera screen is about justice. So without wordsmithing anything now that we're ready to go live or go to print on this stuff, but I want to acknowledge that. And then what was the other thing I was thinking of? Shoot. Darn it, I'll think of it again. It'll come up again, sorry.
All right, thanks, Brenda.
This is it. It came to mind. I'm seeing this on my phone, so I don't see the document. So if someone can email it to me at my email, that'd be awesome. Was there any mention? I can't see the little 1-point letters on my phone. Was there anything in this structure that talks about the committees making their own budgets or having say so in how dollars in the planning phase are spent for the needs that they see are needs? Like, hey, we want to host a forum, we want to do one in each county, and we want it to be, this way with these people and these partners. So there wasn't any, again, I can't see it on my phone, but I don't recall in any of the discussions that budgeting autonomy was mentioned or discussed.
Yeah, thanks for both of those contributions, Brenda. In terms of the budgeting autonomy, there is not currently language in it. I will say the budgeting categories that we're building for the opening application are as broad as they can possibly be to enable a high degree of budgeting flexibility and autonomy, not just across our committees, but across the project, and to also kind of give the time in that planning process for the appropriate oversight of a decision-making body. And so I think we'll talk on the Valley Vision team about how we can represent that in the proposal that also reflects kind of the needs of the state and kind of what they're looking for in terms of how we're characterizing how our budget's getting formed. But I think that, certainly there will be an ability. I mean, that's part of the job of the planning process is really to determine how to allocate resources and give more time and governance decision making around that issue.
Yeah, I think in yesterday's community engagement, that concept is called participatory budgeting. So maybe some reference to working groups shall have the opportunity to participate in participatory budgeting, you know, within the parameters of the program allowables. I don't know, something so that we pin it for ourselves and hold ourselves accountable to make it happen.
Okay, thanks, Brenda. I do want to speak to Anthony's point, like really valid point that he raised around the time. So I know you're just seeing this now and would have loved to have been able to send this in advance. And I'll just tell you frankly that it was our draft was completed around 11:30 this morning. So we're scrambling to get all this done and to give time for feedback. So I appreciate that challenge and that issue, and I know it's really hard to take a product and then review. I will say that the purpose of our session last week, as well as the committees during this week, were to inform where it is now, and that I want to brainstorm a little bit about how to make sure we give enough time and leave it open for review while still meeting the deadlines that we have. It's the second point. And the third point, I really do want to emphasize that I believe the planning phase is an appropriate time to really flesh out the details of these structures and systems. To me, creating the governance structure, creating the values, this is something we can start now, but these are like the most important foundational parts of this whole planning phase. And so in my opinion, to ask us to kind of do that, which the state is doing before we even start the planning phase, is a really high bar. But I also think when I read the guidance, and when I hear from other regions and what they're doing, I do think there's a lot of ability to show what we're starting, and then also to dive into it much deeper during the planning phase and flesh things out and adapt and change things as we need it. And so everything we're creating right now is really to allow us the ability to do that. So like I was just describing, our approach towards the budget is to leave it as open as we possibly can and still meet the requirements of the program proposal. So I just really want to emphasize, I do want to kind of brainstorm around how to give you more time, but I also really want to emphasize that moving into the planning phase, these are not locked in stone forever. This is really kind of where we're starting, and want to put more process and kind of group governance around some of these really important decisions and foundations of our project. Okay, what I think I'd like to do, I would still like to try to get us out at within an hour-ish time frame. So how about this? Let's talk a little bit about the next steps on our part. Let's brainstorm a little bit about how long we might leave this open. And then I would like to do this modified consensus temperature check with you all to see kind of where this is sitting with you at this moment. So, Isa, do you want to talk a little bit about the next steps? And then we'll go from there.
Sure. I think we have Alana, can we pull up our next step slide? Awesome, thank you. Evan, do we want to talk about kind of the collaborative partnership agreement letter first and circle back to this? Okay.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the time frame and then let's circle back to this.
Got it, perfect. Next slide and next slide. Okay, so I want to preview with you all kind of the big next step in this process. As we noted, the application is due on July 25th. And one big piece of this that we're working on and to get done ahead of that deadline is this collective partnership agreement letter, which I think we touched on a little bit at our last meeting. But essentially the collective partnership agreement letter kind of demonstrates to the state that there is this sort of what they call an initial collaborative, this initial group of folks who have been engaging with this process and who are committing to continuing to engage with it in the planning phase. With also the acknowledgement that that's not the full group and that has to get fleshed out more as we get to the planning phase, the need to build that collaborative out more. So this is kind of concretely what that means is this is kind of a slightly different or version of a letter of support that you typically put in with a grant application. So what we're going to be sending out to folks is a couple of pages that sort of outline briefly the vision and goals for our region, as well as this proposed governance structure that you're seeing now with, of course, the input we're taking from this meeting today. And folks are going to be given the opportunity to sign on to that and essentially say, I agree with these, or I'm on board with these vision and goals, and I am looking forward or committing to participate in the planning phase. And what that concretely looks like in terms of gathering information from you all. So signing on would include the bullet points that you're seeing here. So you would indicate your name, organization, contact information, with a very easy kind of literal tick the box, the geographic area you serve and the type of organization or entity you represent, for example, a community-based organization, a government agency or other, and then a brief description of your organization's experience or work with the communities you serve. Again, very short, we're really talking 3 to 5 sentences, short paragraph, as well as what role do you see your organization playing in the CERF planning phase? Again, very short, 3 to 5 sentences, supporting capacity building, playing a role in community engagement, and sort of answering these questions. And likely it will be either in some sort of survey format or a document that you'll be able to download and fill up. That will constitute kind of a signature onto the that overview material of the vision goals and the proposed governance structure. Evan, did I leave anything out there?
No, and I would just add, and maybe you said this, but I'll emphasize it again. So, so we're going to be sending out the materials to all of you and to other partners tomorrow. So that's going to will include kind of high level vision, goals, governance structure, and then a way for you to respond to this request. And I'm not sure if that's a fillable, like a fillable document or a survey link or something like that, but we're going to get that out tomorrow. We really are, to be frank, we're really hoping for your support and your commitment to continue to work on this together, as reflected in you sending that back. Our deadline is Friday next week to get all of our letters in. So I recognize that, again, it's a short time frame. I apologize for that, but I hope that it's not a really high bar that you have to that you have to deliver here. I think it should be not a lot of work on your part in terms of just the type of information that we're looking for. So that's kind of the time, the time frame that we're in, and really just a very sincere ask to come along on this ride with us and be part of our collaborative. Okay, so maybe with that, should we go back to we want to get your kind of more concrete feedback, or I don't know, more concrete feedback, but kind of get your temperature on the governance structure that we shared, and then we'll kind of talk about an opportunity maybe to provide feedback after this meeting as well. So this is the structure that we wanted to propose for all of you to talk about, the governance structure that we shared. So we're going to take it off screen share in a minute, and we're going to ask you to indicate your stance on this. So if you hold up just a 0 or a fist, you're saying, I oppose this proposed governance structure, don't think it should advance, and we will ask you to explain your perspective. If you hold up 3 fingers, I'm okay with advancing this proposed governance structure, but I have some concerns I'd like to share. And we'll also ask you after we call on any 0s, we'll ask the 3s to share comments. And then 5 is, this resonates with me. I look forward to fleshing it out more in the planning phase, so that you're okay with it moving forward. Want to keep in mind, please, that we've taken note of all of the comments that you've made today, and we'll do our best to get those integrated in and certainly share that with you when we have. So any questions? Let's take it off screen share. Any questions on the activity here? If your screen, if your video is not going to be on, you could also put your answer in the chat. Okay. Yeah, and Alana's not voting. I thought she was for a second, but she's actually just putting in the different options into the chat. So thank you for that. Okay, so with that description, I'll let Alana put the last one in there. Yep, there's the description. And we'll ask everyone to indicate your temperature on this right now. And keep it up if you can so that we'll have time to look around. Okay. I see 1, 2, I see a number of 5s. I see a few people with screen off. And so for those with the screen off and you could put your own number into chat, that would be great. Oh, hi, Gabby. Great. Okay, so then I'm gonna, great, awesome. I think we've got votes in for the most part. And if you haven't, please go ahead and put it in the chat. Alana, are you saying that somebody anonymously put in a vote? Got it, okay. 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 So Anthony, I'll call on you first.
Sure. I don't intend I'll be an outlier here, but I do feel like I have a few more concerns that I don't see are addressed fully here. So I see the structure and I see the governance proposal that overall I agree with, but there's still a lot of information that I don't know, such as how will we hold ourselves accountable to it? If we don't have the representation of subgroups, can we continue to just move forward without the inclusion of certain populations that need to be included in this work? I don't see information about our accountability to this structure or to the populations or the values themselves that give me a little bit of pause that we can continue to use timeliness as like an excuse to us making decisions that exclude people or make decisions that aren't aligned with the values that we're presenting.
Okay, thanks for sharing. And Brenda, would you like to share?
I think I already shared mine. But yeah, ditto on some of the other pieces. And I recognize that we're planning to plan, that a lot of this will come into the planning. So maybe what we need is language in this document that leaves a lot of these issues open and to be solved, and that if and when we actually get the grant and hold ourselves to it.
Yep. Okay, anybody else have anything you'd like to share? All right, and I'm looking at Heidi at your very solutions.
Evan,
already.
sorry to be slow there, getting off mute.
Oh, no, please.
I don't know where this idea best comes in, but I'm just thinking, the money coming from CERF sounds like a lot of money, but when you divide it across 13 regions, and there's huge economic development needs across the 8 counties in this collaborative. And so I'm just thinking about how do we actually leverage the collaborative to go after even bigger dollars to really make a region impact, and how do we do that in a collaborative way. So I'm not that when and where we'll address that, but I just wanted to flag that as something, because we're talking about creating a structure now that we can grow into. I think it's going to be a really key part of all of this work.
Thank you for voicing that. Agree. I think that really being focused on being able to align and make a big impact is really important. Okay. So looking at Heidi's comment, perhaps those in the still have concerns category can work with our team on the final governance document and have it ready for full committee review by end of day tomorrow or Monday. That's a great thought, Heidi. I will say that we absolutely must get our collaborative agreement letter out for signatures tomorrow. So, but I believe it will be a somewhat abbreviated version of this. And so maybe, maybe we can go ahead and do that because we'll still be working on the application through next week. So there's still, space to make changes. But in our, our abbreviated version, we'll do our best to reflect the comments that we've heard here today. We'll go ahead and get that out tomorrow. And again, for those who still have, and we'll continue to send this longer version of our governance. We'll send this back out to committee and continue to work with the committee in hopes of getting through some of those concerns. How does that sound?
That sounds good. I forgot about the letters that still need to be signed. So we need some structure. So really good point.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. I see your comment. Okay, well, again, really appreciate everybody here. We will be in touch with our amended review, and then you will also see a separate email from us with a request to sign on to a collaborative partnership agreement, where you'll see a version of this governance structure included in there. And I will likely be in touch with many of you next week as we're trying to pull those signatures together and get our reviews done and things like that. But we are just incredibly appreciative of the wisdom that you're all bringing, of all the comments that we're hearing, all really important to surface, and including the cases where there's critical comments. That's part of the process, and we appreciate all the things being surfaced. So thank you for that. And really, again, looking forward to continuing this process with you all, and you'll continue to see the products that we're putting forward for this. So any last comments before we wrap up? All right, then we'll wish you a good afternoon. Thanks, everyone.